So, right then, hi everyone. My name's Lauren Craven-Niemczyk and I am a nutritional therapist. I'm actually based in Hove, so I do recognise quite a few of you and a few names. So yeah, I'm a kind of UK collaborator and educator with Vitae, and we're going to be talking about menopause. My internet connection does say it's a little bit unstable, so Joanna, if you could let me know throughout if there's any any kind of disturbances, that would be good. Okay, so yes, what is menopause? So we're going to go through definitions of menopause, common symptoms of menopause and perimenopause, diet to support menopause, including food and nutrients to include and those to avoid, the kind of lifestyle recommendations that we would have, and then we're going to go through some natural treatments, and I'll talk you through supplements from Vitae. So if you have any questions, I think it might just be kind of neater because it's quite a large group if we answer them at the end, if that's okay. So yeah, we'll have a bit of a Q&A session at the end of this. So in terms of the definition of menopause, so it's the permanent and natural cessation of menses, so periods, resulting from ovarian cycle cessation. And this is caused by estrogen deficiency and it's not associated with a pathology. So obviously it is a perfectly normal stage of life. And it's officially defined when there have been no consecutive menses for 12 months with no other cause. So I tend to think of it as more of an event rather than a period of time, because beforehand we've got perimenopause, and then of course after menopause is postmenopause. So yeah, so the median age of menopause is about 51 years, but obviously that can fluctuate quite a bit. So in terms of the kind of causes for menopause, obviously natural menopause is just due to the decline in estrogen and when you stop ovulating, so you stop releasing eggs. But also if women have their ovaries removed or damaged, then that can also cause menopause. Also, similarly, if they're on particular medication or they're taking medication to stop their natural hormones, for example, if they're on chemotherapy or they're having any kind of cancer treatment, then that can also cause kind of a chemically induced menopause. There's also something called premature ovarian insufficiency, and so this is when the ovaries stop producing estrogen before the age of 40, and that can also be termed early menopause. There's quite a lot of different, kind of things to bear in mind when it comes to defining menopause. Okay, so the term climacteric is actually a medical term, and it means the period of life when fertility and sexual activity are in decline. So in women, that is sort of as the menopause. So kind of pre about 50 years is the premenopause period. And this is when women have their normal reproductive years with regular periods and no noticeable menopausal changes. And then when you move into perimenopause, this is a period that can last 2 to 12 years. So with some women, this can start at about, if the average age is 51 years for menopause, it could be in their late 30s that they begin perimenopausal changes. And this is the transitional time as estrogen is lowering or estrogen levels are quite variable. So this includes the menopause transition, which is 12 months after the menopause, and then of course postmenopause is all the years beyond menopause, so that can be 30 plus years, so it's quite a considerable chunk of time. Okay, so there are two graphs here. So the one on the left is a kind of more general view at the hormone levels. So we've got the age along the bottom and hormone levels on the y-axis. So estrogen is shown here as kind of gradually declining throughout the 40s and 50s. As with, that's the same with progesterone, and testosterone is also declining slightly, not quite as dramatically. Now, some women have experience, and this is what is kind of generally touted to be the menopausal transition, but what a lot of women experience is actually the graph on the right-hand side, which I've taken from a website from Lara Bryden, who is a really good source on kind of any reproductive issues, female hormone issues. Yeah, so I would really recommend her website. But so, yeah, what you can see here is that estrogen is actually, in the perimenopausal transition, it's very, very variable. So in some cases, it can drop down to very low levels, and it can also increase to sometimes double the estrogen levels of a kind of premenopausal woman. So this can be the reason for a lot of the symptoms in menopause. It's not just low estrogen, it's actually very variable levels of estrogen. And then the progesterone, again, is more of a gradual decline, and that's because obviously the main way that we produce progesterone, apart from a small amount from our adrenal glands, is when we ovulate. So when the egg is released from the corpus luteum, that is what continues to produce progesterone, as well as if you're pregnant. So what tends to happen during perimenopause is there are more frequent and ovulatory cycles. So you may still get a bleed due to the kind of fluctuating levels of hormones, but you won't have actually released an egg, which means that you don't produce progesterone. So it's kind of a bit more staggered in terms of the decline of progesterone. So you might have some months where you have a normal cycle, you produce progesterone, and then another month you won't ovulate. You might get a light bleed or a particularly heavy bleed, but you won't have ovulated, so your progesterone levels will be lower. Okay, and then obviously, we've got a couple more people come in. Obviously, then post-menopause. So this is generally 24 to 36 months after your last period. And this is when symptoms begin to subside and estrogen levels are more stable. Oh, I can hear it. If everybody who's joining, if they're able to mute, that would be good, because there's a little bit of background noise. And then, yeah, of course, your estrogen levels are more consistent and low, and your progesterone levels are also lower. Okay, so now looking at the main sex hormones. So estrogen, the things that estrogen do in the body physiologically are they stimulate the growth of breast tissue, they maintain vaginal blood flow and lubrication, and they keep the vaginal lining elastic. And this is one of the main hormones involved in the menstrual cycle. There are a number of estrogens, as I'm sure you're all aware. So it's mainly estradiol that's involved in the menstrual cycle, and it's the strongest form of estrogen. What else do I have to say about this? Okay, so in terms of symptoms of high and low levels of estrogen, so high levels cause bloating, breast tenderness, and heavy bleeding, and low levels cause hot flushes, night sweats, palpitations, headaches, insomnia, depression, fatigue, bone loss, and vaginal dryness. That's quite a lengthy list there. So in general, in perimenopause, women can experience a mixture of those symptoms, because they, as we saw before, they can have periods of really high levels and then dropping down to low. Oh, there's a little bit of background noise there. So during the perimenopause transition, there's huge variation in terms of estrogen levels. about 5 years after menopause, this is when the cell receptors kind of become adapted to a lower level of estrogen. So this tends to be when any kind of menopausal symptoms reduce, regardless of whether they've had any kind of natural or medical treatment. So there is light at the end of the tunnel for many women who are going through particularly severe symptoms. And then, so progesterone. So progesterone prepares the uterus lining for a fertilized egg, and it helps maintain early pregnancy. There are a lot of other full body effects of progesterone, not just reproductive. So progesterone, we're going to go through this in a bit more detail a little bit later on, but progesterone is really key in calming your nervous system and affecting brain health, while estrogen stimulates it. So there's a balancing effect with all of these hormones. Progesterone boosts your thyroid, progesterone thins your uterine lining, and progesterone is thought of as being potentially preventative for breast cancer. So low levels, of course, would be the opposite of all of those. So you may struggle with more hypothyroid issues. You may become more anxious or depressed. Yeah, there may potentially be a higher risk of breast cancer, but then specifically when it comes to reproductive issues, you will have more irregular, heavier and longer menstruation, and then spotting as well. So testosterone, although it is not directly involved in the menopausal transition, as in stopping ovulating doesn't affect testosterone levels, testosterone levels do tend to decline with age. So testosterone plays a key role in women's estrogen production. It contributes to libido, and it also plays a role in maintaining bone and muscle mass. So when testosterone is in lower amounts, it's not fully kind of understood the effects, because research has shown like conflicting things, but there may be a change in sex drive and mood. So libido may be lower and you may be more prone to depression. Okay, so moving on to some symptoms. So, of course, female sex hormones don't just affect the reproductive system, they affect the entire body. So a lot of the symptoms reflect that. So it's full body symptoms when it comes to the reduction in these hormones. So vasomotor symptoms are any kind of symptoms that involve blood vessels. So more specifically, this can be vasodilation, vasoconstriction, which are the main kind of symptoms of menopause: night sweats and hot flushes. And so then we've also got psychological symptoms such as anxiety and depression, mood changes, irritability, that kind of thing. Gastrointestinal symptoms, so estrogen plays a large role with when it comes to serotonin, and a lot of our gastrointestinal processes are also closely involved with that. So a lot of serotonin is made in the gut, and that can also cause quite a lot of digestive issues, which a lot of women don't expect around menopause. And then we've got changes in sex organs and the urinary system, which we're going to go on to in a bit more detail. Emotional symptoms, which we've talked about, musculoskeletal symptoms, so not only the higher risk of lower bone density and osteoporosis, but also sarcopenia, which is the reduction in muscle mass. That can also be an issue around menopause. And some more inflammatory conditions like menopausal arthritis, they can also kind of come to the fore around this time. And then secondary conditions, so we've talked about osteoporosis, but also cardiovascular disease. So female hormones like estrogen and progesterone have quite a large effect on your cardiovascular system. Again, we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. Okay, so going through the symptoms now. So hot flushes are one of the most severe and main symptoms of perimenopause. They involve temporary but recurring episodes of flushing with a heat sensation on the upper body and face. And they're reported by up to 75% of perimenopausal women in the United States. So the types of hot flushing can really vary from woman to woman. So some women might not get them at all. Some women will get them once a week. Some women will get them every half an hour, and they're really debilitating. Some can last minutes and others can last seconds. So hot flushes and night sweats are thought to be caused by the loss of estrogen. And this is reflected in a decreased density of a particular estrogen receptor and lower activity of serotonin. So this is the kind of the science behind the kind of fluctuations in temperature regulation. So yeah, so hot flushes are not thought to be caused by low estrogen per se, but the rapidly dropping estrogen that can happen during perimenopause. So what the notes have I got about this? So estrogen receptors in the central nervous system are responsible for temperature regulation, and administration of drugs acting at this particular receptor restores normal temperature regulation. So in addition to this, the nighttime prevalence of hot flashes and night sweats could be a result of the conversion of serotonin to melatonin at night, resulting in lower circulating serotonin levels. Okay, and then obviously it's quite disruptive to daily life and mainly sleep. So a lot of women who have hot flushes and night sweats, it will have quite a big effect on their sleep, their quality of sleep, the duration of sleep, and yeah, so frequency, severity, and duration of hot flushes can vary from day to day and between women. Hot flushes and sweats usually keep occurring for more than 1 year, and without treatment normally they will disappear after 4 to 5 years, and this tends to be when the cell receptors have adapted to a lower level of estrogen. Okay, so any kind of symptomatic changes in the vagina, vulva and urinary systems. Less estrogen, this is mainly an estrogenic symptom. So less estrogen causes the tissues of the vulva and the lining of the vagina to become thinner, drier and less elastic or flexible. So as you can see on the illustration here, the lining with estrogen and lining in a lower estrogen state has far fewer of those protective cells, and the lining tends to be less kind of plump and much drier. So vaginal secretions are reduced, and reduced levels of estrogen also can cause a increase in vaginal pH. So that means it's more alkaline and less acidic. And this is important because a normal kind of healthy pH of the vagina is about 3.8 to 4.5 on the pH scale. So that's quite acidic, and that helps to inhibit bacterial colonization. So a less acidic vaginal pH means that it's more susceptible to yeast like Candida and bacterial infections. So women may experience an increased frequency of thrush and UTIs around this time, or increase in severity if it's something that they've dealt with for most of their life anyway. So I'm not so keen on the kind of terminology here. So healthy vagina on the left and vaginal atrophy on the right. So on the left, it's just a higher estrogen state, and so potentially like premenopausal, and on the right it's a lower estrogen state, so postmenopausal. So we've got a change into the vaginal lining, so it goes from being thick and moist, elastic and with plenty of lubrication, to being drier, thinner, less elastic, and actually shortening of the vaginal canal. So in more severe kind of conditions, this would cause atrophic vaginitis, which is inflammation of the vagina associated with a loss of estrogen after menopause. So this condition can include redness, vaginal discharge, and other vulvovaginal symptoms like dryness, irritation, burning, itchiness, and pain. So studies have shown that regular vaginal sexual activity through menopause can help keep the vaginal tissues thick and moist and maintain the vagina's length and width. Okay, so in terms of the urinary system, we've got kind of two different things that are affecting it. So we've got menopause and the declining estrogen levels, which result in a thinner urethra lining. And then we've also got aging, which causes weaker pelvic muscles and pelvic relaxation. So both of these together really increase the risk for urinary incontinence or involuntary leakage of urine. So stress incontinence is caused by weak pelvic floor muscles, and the most common symptoms are leakage of urine with coughing, laughing, and sneezing. And then urge incontinence is caused by an overly active or irritated bladder muscles. And the most common symptom in this case is the frequent and sudden urge to urinate. So urge incontinence kind of goes hand in hand with interstitial cystitis. And again, this is another condition that's more common during menopause, and the symptoms are quite similar. So it's not necessarily related to a bacterial infection of the urinary tract. It's more to do with the kind of degradation and increased sensitivity of the lining of the urinary tract and the bladder. So again, that could be contributed to by lower levels of estrogen. Problems are quite a big one when it comes to menopause. So this includes trouble falling asleep or just better quality of sleep through the night, and also mood swings and depressive moods link into that. So a decline in quality of sleep during midlife may be due to changes in hormones, hot flushes and night sweats, increased need to urinate in the middle of the night, the onset of sleep-related disorders like sleep apnea, and stress, depression, and chronic pain. So, of course, the lower levels of estrogen, as we've talked about, have wide-ranging symptoms on the body, including palpitations, insomnia, fatigue, and depression, which can all affect your ability to sleep. But also, the sudden drop of estrogen can cause hot flushes, and the prevalence of sleep apnea also increases with age anyway. The pain one is interesting. So hormones like estrogen and progesterone have actually shown to affect women's experience of pain quite significantly. So the variation in symptom severity across the menstrual cycle can vary quite a lot in a number of clinical pain conditions like fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, interstitial cystitis, and migraines. And of course, during pregnancy, which is a high progesterone state, a lot of clinical pain conditions can improve, like arthritis, migraines, and pelvic pain. So during perimenopause and postmenopause, when your progesterone levels are much lower, then that can mean that some pain disorders which maybe were less severe or masked can become more severe. And pain is one of the main it affects sleep hugely. So that's definitely something to bear in mind if your clients, obviously the picture for different clients will vary. But yeah, chronic pain is a big one to pay attention to. So mood changes. So sometimes mood changes during menopause aren't kind of taken as seriously as physiological changes, but actually, I mean, yeah, it affects it. Hormones affect women's mood hugely. So some scientific studies support the idea that menopause contributes to clinical depression, severe anxiety, or erratic behaviour. And hormone fluctuations, stress, sleep, sleep issues, and concerns about body image, fertility, and aging can all cause emotional distress, which may lead to mood swings or, in severe cases, depression. So there's a number of internal and external causes for stress there. But just looking at hormone fluctuations for a minute. So in terms of progesterone, it does two main things in the brain. So it promotes neurogenesis, which is new nerve growth, in the hippocampus region of the brain, which is the main regulator of the HPA axis, so the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And it also converts to the beneficial neurosteroid allopregnanolone, or just allo as it's known, which modulates GABA receptors. And GABA is a chief kind of inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain, so it calms everything down. It's anti-anxiety, it's very relaxing. So that's what progesterone does. So a lack of progesterone, therefore, can potentially result in dysregulation of the HPA axis, and also an inability to deal with stress, or a lowered ability to deal with stress. And then in terms of estrogen, so estrogen is thought to increase serotonin, so there's a relationship there, which obviously boosts mood, and estrogen deficiency can cause a decline in serotonin that contributes to mood swings or depression. The incidence of depression is higher in women than men anyway, and it's hypothesized that fluctuating levels of estrogen seem to indicate a higher risk of depression. So again, during perimenopause, it might not be the kind of absolute levels of estrogen that are the issue, it's the fact that it's constantly fluctuating. And this is also potentially the reason why PMS is exists due to the kind of the significant drop in hormones just before a period. Okay, so how are we doing for time? We're doing okay. So in terms of diet, so we're going to go through each one of these in a bit more detail. So the things that we would potentially want to recommend are phytoestrogens, the amino acid taurine, dairy products, healthy fats in fruit and vegetables, of course, and to avoid added sugars and processed carbohydrates, alcohol, caffeine, spicy foods, and high salt foods. So first of all, phytoestrogens. So as I'm sure you're all aware, so phytoestrogens are estrogens that come from plants. Oh, we've got someone joining. They're non-steroidal chemical compounds that have a similar action to human estrogens, but much weaker. Now, phytoestrogens have been part of our traditional diet for a very long period of time, so we're well adapted to them. They regulate and metabolize estradiol, which is our strongest estrogen. Now, phytoestrogens have a different effect on the body depending on what stage of life you're at, and also scientists are beginning to think that there's quite a strong genetic link with how you process phytoestrogens. So that's something to bear in mind if your client reacts in an unexpected way. But typically, women who are still having periods and they have quite a high level of estradiol, phytoestrogens will have a kind of estrogen suppressing effect, so much so that if women are eating a lot of soy or other phytoestrogens, but mainly it's soy, then they can actually have much lighter periods, or their periods can stop altogether. But then when it comes to post-menopause, because estradiol is so low, the main estrogen during menopause is estrone, which is much weaker, and therefore phytoestrogens, when they connect to our estrogen receptors, they actually have a kind of estrogen boosting, for want of a better word, effect. So a pro-estrogenic effect, there we go. So this can result in improved vasomotor symptoms associated with menopause. So phytoestrogens are associated with a reduction in the hot flush frequency, and foods that naturally contain phytoestrogens include soybeans, chickpeas, peanuts, flax seeds, barley, and then a number of fruits and vegetables. In terms of the research, it's mainly supporting hot flushes and night sweats. So all the other symptoms of menopause, it's either been inconclusive or it's shown that it hasn't really improved at all. So definitely something to recommend either in supplemental form or in a dietary form for women who are really struggling with hot flushes and night sweats. I don't think there's anything else to mention about that. Obviously, fermented is much better than unfermented, but and organic and non-GM as well. So taurine is an amino acid and a neurotransmitter, and it calms the brain by boosting GABA. So GABA is the chief inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. And it also blocks glutamate and adrenaline, which are excitatory neurotransmitters. So that's all to say that it has a very calming and anti-anxiety effect on the body. And interestingly, taurine is depleted by estrogen. So during that perimenopausal roller coaster, you may need more taurine than you would have done before. So the combination of concurrent exercise and taurine supplementation promoted a reduction in total cholesterol and LDL levels in postmenopausal women, and also that's related to increased hypothalamic insulin sensitivity. So not only will it improve mood potentially, but also it has a strong effect on cardiovascular risk factors. And then, so dairy products, this is a slightly controversial one, and every kind of practitioner will have a different opinion, but obviously dairy products are very high in calcium. They're also high in other minerals and vitamins, particularly fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin K, K2, and a lot of dairy products are supplemented with vitamin D, so they're often high in that, and retinol as well, which is quite hard to find in a lot of foods. So all of those fat-soluble vitamins, along with calcium and phosphorus that's in dairy products, can really help bone health. And that's the main reason for this being recommended. I would probably recommend sheep's and goat's dairy and buffalo dairy because of the A2 protein rather than A1 protein, which is in cow's dairy. And I'd also maybe recommend more fermented forms like yogurt and kefir and cheese rather than milk, just due to the kind of the growth factors and the insulin-like growth factors in milk. Okay, so moving on to healthy fats. So specifically, we're talking about essential fatty acids and omega-3 fatty acids. So there's quite, I mean, obviously there's so many benefits to omega-3s. I won't even go into all of that, but specifically for the menopause, omega-3 fatty acids have an excellent effect on degenerative diseases like heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, hypertension, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes. So these are all diseases that become more prevalent with age, and that is due to the EPA content, which is very anti-inflammatory. Now, another important part of omega-3 fatty acids is the DHA content, which is more of a structural, getting a couple of these comments in the chat. Let me just have a look at this. Oh no. So yeah, the DHA part of omega-3 is most important at the kind of the beginning stages of life, so during pregnancy and the early years, and also during the latter phases of life. So any kind of brain remodeling, it's very important to have adequate amounts of DHA. So there's also a link between omega-3 acids and increasing bone mineral content. And that may partly be because osteoporosis is an inflammatory disease, so it might be the EPA anti-inflammatory component that has that effect. And then specifically to do with hot flushes, omega-3 supplements decrease the frequency of hot flushes and the severity of night sweats in a particular study. I didn't mention before, but all of these studies are referenced and they're in the slides. So when you get the slides emailed out, you'll be able to see all of the references and do a bit of extra reading if you'd like. And then fruits and vegetables. So a particular study of 17,000 menopausal women found that those eating more vegetables, fruit, fibre and soy experienced a 19% reduction in hot flushes. And other studies showed that cruciferous vegetables like broccoli decreased levels of a type of estrogen linked to breast cancer. So obviously the soy we've kind of discussed, so in the phytoestrogen section. But in terms of estrogen detoxification, brassica vegetables, so that includes like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, mustard seeds or mustard greens and turnips, they're a really rich source of a compound called DIM, diindole methane, which promotes metabolism of estrogens to the less carcinogenic to hydroxyestrogen. And broccoli also contains a chemical called sulforaphane, which upregulates an enzyme that blocks the production of a potentially carcinogenic 4-hydroxyestrogen. So these kind of brassica vegetables affect estrogen detoxification in those two ways. In addition, the fibre that comes from eating more fruit and vegetables and whole grains aids in the detoxification of estrogen as well. So that's really important because, again, during that roller coaster phase in perimenopause, estrogen levels can sometimes be twice as high as they were in your premenopausal, kind of normal menstruation years. And high unopposed estrogen can cause these severe symptoms, but also potentially might be more of a cancer risk. And then, so moving on to the foods that we want to avoid. So added sugars and processed carbohydrates, obviously we would recommend this anyway, but this is because high blood sugar and insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome have been linked to higher incidence of hot flushes in menopausal women. So as an easy win, if a client has a particularly high sugar diet, then this is a good kind of motivating thing to get them to reduce their sugar and refined carbohydrate consumption. And yeah, of course. So the type 2 diabetes and development of insulin resistance are accelerated by low estrogen. And premenopausal women have been shown to have a lower chance of type 2 diabetes than men. I'm not sure whether that extends to after menopause. So alcohol, consuming 2 to 5 drinks a day during menopause is considered excessive and may harm women's health, worsening menopausal symptoms. And researchers have also linked drinking to an increase in hot flushes and night sweats in some women. So alcohol can also increase estrogen levels, which can worsen the roller coaster of perimenopause. And a lot of these things that I'm saying, I'm not going into too much detail because I want to be able to kind of cover a lot of ground. But yeah, if you've got any questions at the end, then I'm happy to answer them. And then so finally, we've got caffeine. And we've got a couple more. Caffeine. So link between caffeine use and menopause vasomotor symptoms. So that's the hot flushes and night sweats. there is a link between them, and caffeine, alcohol and sugar are some common triggers for hot flushes. So again, that's something to bear in mind. Again, it will differ from woman to woman, but those are some things to test removing. And then of course, when it comes to sleep, caffeine can be a major disruptor. So spicy food and high salt foods, these can be associated with an increase in hot flushes, and spicy foods, interestingly, have been associated with higher anxiety levels as well. Now, most of these foods, so apart from spicy foods, so caffeine, alcohol, high salt foods, high sugar foods, and then of course smoking, they're all implicated in reducing bone density. And this is mainly due to their kind of acidic effects on blood pH, and because calcium is one of the most alkaline minerals in the body, it's used as a buffer in order to maintain that really tight kind of window of equilibrium in terms of pH. So yeah, it's really important to be mindful of bone health, because it's one of those kind of invisible conditions until you have a really severe fracture. Okay, so these are all the references. So I won't go through those, but you've got those there for reference when you get the slides. So now looking at lifestyle. So of course we've talked about improving sleep and reducing stress. So I suppose this is what comes into the more kind of therapeutic side of nutritional therapy, and just ensuring that women are aware of the kind of the frequency and the fact that it's very common to suffer from anxiety and depression and mood changes during the menopausal transition, and recommending all of the usual things, so like exercise, eating well, avoiding caffeine and alcohol and other stimulants, trying to improve sleep as much as possible, trying to embrace being playful and bringing lots of laughter into your life. Yeah, we could talk a lot about chronic stress here, but I'm aware of time, so I'm gonna move on. And then, of course, recommend all of your usual sleep supportive techniques. So when it comes to improving sleep hygiene, having a regular schedule, avoiding heavy evening meals, adjusting light, noise, temperature, avoiding screens and blue light, alcohol, caffeine and nicotine and any stimulating drugs, and temperature in the bedroom, which is an important one because during hot flushes you might feel it a little bit more. Okay, so we're going to move on to some of the supplements now. So the first one is Calm 2, and so this is a blend of herbal extracts, and it's recommended to provide relaxation in cases of nervous anxiety, nervous energy, avoid nighttime awakenings, induce sleep, and improve and contribute to stress management. So it contains California poppy. I'm not going to try and pronounce the I think it's the Latin name. California poppy, valerian, and passion flower. So there's quite a lot of research behind valerian. It's one of the most kind of well-known herbs when it comes to helping sleep and also inducing calm. So it's been shown to improve the quality of sleep without side effects, and it mainly helps to reduce the time to fall asleep. So it improves sleep latency. And one particular study found that improved sleep quality in a controlled trial of those having chemotherapy, and reducing sleep latency as well. So it's thought to work, the mechanism is thought to be that it enhances the signaling of one of the main sedative neurotransmitters, which is GABA, which we've talked about before. In fact, a lot of the herbs that we're going to talk about have that action on receptors that are related to GABA. And then passion flower is recommended for use for restlessness, irritability, and anxiety. And it's used to reduce tension. It's a traditional herbal sedative, anxiolytic, which means anti-anxiety, and a popular sleep aid. So again, this is thought to be a benzodiazepine receptor partial agonist. So that means that it stimulates the receptors, the benzodiazepine receptors, and causes GABA system-mediated anti-anxiety. So you might know of the benzodiazepine receptors because those are the ones that are stimulated by drugs like diazepam or alprazolam, which are Valium and Xanax. So not that they would have the exact same effect, but that it would be similar to that, and it would involve the same receptor. So animal behavioural models have shown non-sedative anxiolytic effects. And then finally, California poppy is thought to reduce the effects of nervousness and anxiety. It demonstrates really good results when it's combined with other medicinal plants. And again, this is with a lot of the kind of ingredient mixes with Vitae, they tend to do research so that they can reduce the dose and pair it with other ingredients which will have a kind of symbiotic effect. And this is one of those examples. So again, California poppy is thought to act as a weak stimulator of a GABA receptor agonist. So most of the studies have been done, they're mostly animal studies in rats. So there's not huge amounts of research on it, but that is thought to be the mechanism. So CALM-2 is recommended to be used either during the day, so 1 capsule during the day. And again, all of those, the whole point of CALM-2 is not to make you sleepy or to be a sedative, it's just to make you feel much calmer and more relaxed. So you can have it during the day for anxiety, or you can take it at night to increase the dosage. So you can have up to 2 to 3 capsules before bedtime, particularly if you're suffering with sleep onset insomnia. So if you're feeling particularly anxious before bed, then this is a really good option. Now, there's another supplement called CALM-2 Night, which I'll just briefly talk about. Now, this does contain melatonin, 1 milligram of melatonin. So you can buy it from Vitae, which is obviously based in Spain. So you can buy it from the Vitae website, and I think quite a few people in the UK do. This particular product isn't on the natural dispensary, but all of the other ones are. So in addition to melatonin, this also has melissa and a small amount of magnesium. And melissa has shown in studies to improve sleep latency. So again, that's the time to get to sleep. And of course, magnesium is just an incredible stress reliever. It boosts GABA, it blocks glutamate, it reduces adrenaline and cortisol, and promotes sleep. So, I mean, magnesium, in addition to some of these herbal supplements, magnesium is definitely something that I would recommend during menopause. And there's a few extra ones. Okay, so the next supplement is Olivita. And so this, the main ingredient of this is Seabrook thorn oil. And it's recommended to relieve vaginal dryness, any kind of dry condition like dry eyes, dry nose and mouth, repair gastrointestinal mucosa, relieve the symptoms of skin conditions, again, mainly dry ones, so peeling, eczema, sunburn, I think people may use it for that, and also to mitigate the effects of drugs on skin and mucous membranes and improve the hydration and elasticity of dry or aged skin. So at the top here, we've got a breakdown of all of the different kinds of omega fatty acids. So we've got omega-7, which is the main kind of unique component of Seabrook thorn oil. There's also omega-9, omega-6, and a small amount of omega-3. And so sea buckthorn oil is unusual because I think it's the only, do we have it here? Yeah, so it's the only plant food thought to provide all 4 omega fatty acids, which I think is interesting. This is actually a bestseller in Spain, and it's particularly good for anybody going through the menopausal transition. So it's great for hydration and improving mucous membranes and skin. So yeah, so it's used a lot in dry conditions. Some small studies have actually shown some cardiovascular benefits to this supplement. So reducing hypertension, reducing triglycerides and LDL cholesterol. And then a really interesting study on 98 postmenopausal women. They took 3 grams of sea buckthorn oil. So this, I think, yeah, so 4 capsules of this is 2 grams. So it's still, you know, it's a kind of doable dose. So 98 postmenopausal women took 3 grams of sea buckthorn oil for 3 months. And it was found that there was a significant improvement in integrity of vaginal epithelium. So yeah, I would, if I was going to recommend one one supplement, it would probably, for menopause, it would probably be this one. So again, that can also help with urinary infections because it involves the same mucous membranes. And then there's a cream, which is also part of the Oleovita range. So this is an external cream which has sea buckthorn oil in, but also hyaluronic acid and some particular peptides which are very calming. And it's used to relieve vaginal dryness, relieve symptoms of skin conditions, to again be used externally only, and improve the hydration and elasticity of dry or aged skin. So it includes, I actually forgot to mention this about the Oleovita supplement as well, includes vitamin A in the form of beta carotene and also vitamin E in alpha tocopherol. So both of those improve, or rather maintain, epithelia and also protect against cellular aging because they're both antioxidants. Hyaluronic acid, which is in this product, is particularly hydrating. Anybody who's interested in skincare will know about that particular supplement. It's also found naturally in the skin. So omega-7 is found in the cells of skin and mucous membranes naturally, and it favours the hydration, the passage of nutrients and protection against microorganisms and free radicals. It strengthens, moisturises and renews the skin and mucous membranes, and reduces roughness and increases skin elasticity. So I think this is a really, I think it's really popular actually in Spain. Joanna can probably tell you a bit more about this at the end, but yeah, I really like it because it's a much more natural product, and I don't really feel as though there are any comparable products in the kind of natural health world. And whenever we have this product at any kind of like conferences or stands, the samples go very, very quickly. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to go over just slightly. So the next supplement is Flexum Pro. So this contains quite a few ingredients. So it contains the kind of the usual mix for any joint, or well, mainly joint, sometimes bone pathologies, so glucosamine, MSM and chondroitin, but it also teams them with some anti-inflammatory extracts. So we've got turmeric in there, we've got zinc, there's the black pepper to kind of emphasize the anti-inflammatory aspects. And it's recommended to prevent articular and bone pathologies, recover cartilage bone mass, decrease pain and inflammation, and maintain joint health when exercising or practicing sport. So yeah, just talking about this in a little bit more detail. So it's been shown that the strong anti-inflammatory ingredients increase the efficacy and make the product product's effect's more noticeable, a little bit faster. So usually it's after 15 days, whereas other joint products can take up to 2 months. And that's thought to be because of the curcumin and black pepper combination. There's also a cream which contains magnesium and coenzyme Q10, which is obviously an external cream, and it helps the muscle to recover and reinforce the whole joint system. So the addition of silica, I think, is really important here. So the silica is derived from bamboo. It's obviously a natural source of silicon. A lot of people forget about silica when they're recommending anything for joints and bone, but actually it's a really, particularly with bone, it's there's quite a high proportion of silica in bone. It participates in the synthesis of collagen, and it also contributes to bone formation and connective tissue. So so this could be recommended for osteoporosis, any kind of joint pain or joint inflammation, which, as we were talking about before, can tend to flare up around menopause or appear having not been there before, and musculoskeletal symptoms. And then finally, we've got Reconnect. So Reconnect is a mixture of CoQ10, NADH, and then it's got some vitamin C and some serine, which is similar to phosphatidylserine. And it's recommended to improve functions, learning ability, concentration, memory, and ability to think clearly, stress management, improve mood, regulate the sleep-wake cycle, reduce fatigue, and reduce memory loss caused through aging. So there's actually a study that was done on this particular supplement. So it was done with Vitae, and it was a study on 73 patients with chronic fatigue syndrome, and they were given 200 milligrams of CoQ10 and 20 milligrams of NADH, which is slightly higher dose. I think it's 4 tablets, and that was for 8 weeks. And they directly measured ATP levels, and those on the supplements had significantly higher levels, and fatigue scores significantly improved. So the reason why this study's been done on chronic fatigue patients is because it's the more kind of advanced and extreme fatigue. And this is a really popular product again, and it's used by athletes actually, because it gives them a lot of energy, but rather than stimulating cortisol levels, if you get energy from caffeine or another stimulant like that, it gives you energy, but without the kind of lag afterwards and and side effects. So let me just see, what else can we talk about? So coenzyme Q10 produces 95% of the body's energy, ATP. It's really important in cellular respiration. It's also an antioxidant, and CoQ10 supplementation has been shown to reduce neurodegenerative diseases. And then NADH, along with CoQ10, leads to cellular energy production or ATP production in the Krebs cycle. It's an antioxidant, and it's involved in the synthesis of neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline and noradrenaline. So as I said before, in athletes, when they supplement with this, it helps to provide more muscle strength, endurance, and resilience. So then the serine is a tryptophan precursor, and tryptophan is of course the precursor of serotonin, and it stimulates the release of neurotransmitters, dopamine and acetylcholine. It's the primary component of phosphatidylserine, which is the main endogenous phospholipid in the brain. So I think I've mentioned scientific papers there and research. I hope I haven't bored you too much.